All right, folks. This is one of those moments that makes you sit up and realize just how wild and unpredictable the game of politics has become. Picture this. Two people from completely different ends of the spectrum. One, a billionaire tech visionary with a reputation for disruption. The other, a sharp-tongued congresswoman known for pulling no punches and calling things exactly as she sees them. They don't come from the same world. They don't sit at the same tables. In fact, just months ago, it would have been unthinkable to see their names in the same headline, let alone working in concert. But that's exactly what happened. And when it did, the tremors could be felt far beyond Washington. Now, this wasn't one of those rehearsed political alliances cooked up in a back room with 1,000 lawyers and handlers. No, this was raw, real, and completely unexpected. It started with a few pointed comments, each from their own corner of the ring, but slowly, subtly, you could see the pieces falling into place. The tech giant, always one to challenge the status quo, made a move that signaled he was watching. He shared something, liked a post. Then came a short but unmistakable reply. That alone lit up the internet. But the Congresswoman? She came out swinging. In a packed session with cameras rolling and tension sky high, she delivered a scorching analysis of everything that had been brewing under the surface. It wasn't personal. It was precise. A breakdown of timelines, quotes, contradictions, and actions that spoke louder than any tweet or press release ever could. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade through butter. You could feel the room shift. You could see faces freeze. It was the kind of truth-telling that doesn't just rattle cages, it knocks doors off their hinges. What made this so explosive wasn't just the content. It was the timing. The digital mogul, known for playing 4D chess while others are stuck on checkers, followed up with a move of his own. He didn't shout. He didn't rant. Just a subtle nod. A signal. A message to his massive audience that said, "Pay attention." And when he does that, it doesn't matter which party you belong to. You listen. Because love him or hate him, when he speaks, markets shift, media scrambles, and narratives start to bend. Now you've got the Congresswoman bringing fire from the floor, backed by facts and figures, and the digital kingpin amplifying her message to millions. Two powerhouses, two completely different sources of influence, but both now laser-focused on exposing the same tangled mess, lies, contradictions, and a deeply flawed sense of invincibility. And this wasn't coordinated in some obvious political stunt. That's what made it dangerous. That's what made it real. They didn't need to sit in a room together to shake the foundation. Their actions, words, and timing did it for them. And make no mistake, this wasn't just some fluke. This wasn't a one-day headline destined to fade. It was the kind of moment that marks a shift. A turning point. Because when two titans, one from tech, one from Congress, start aiming in the same direction, you better believe people take notice. The internet lit up, phones rang off the hook, newsrooms scrambled, and the very person they were addressing, well, the reaction was instant. You could feel the heat. The defensive posts, the spin doctors jumping in, the talking heads trying to change the subject, it all happened in real time. But none of it could undo the fact that a boundary had been crossed. A moment of clarity had broken through the fog. And it wasn't delivered with rage or vengeance. It was strategic, sharp, and calm. That's what made it cut deeper. Because when someone known for logic and algorithms and someone known for fiery, no-holds-barred debate land on the same truth, without planning, without fanfare, it makes you stop, it makes you think, and it makes a whole lot of people very nervous. It all started like any other day in the whirlwind world of American politics. Loud voices, sharp tweets, bold declarations echoing across social media. But this time, things took a turn no one saw coming. One key player made what he believed was a power move, stepping into the spotlight with a statement designed to control the narrative, sway the base, and reassert dominance. It was loud, brash, and dripping with the usual confidence. For a moment, it looked like business as usual. Then, everything changed. In the digital haze, a single post emerged. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream for attention. It simply dropped almost casually from one of the most influential tech minds of this generation. Just a few words, calm, cutting, and calculated. The kind of post that doesn't beg for a reaction, but dares the world to reconsider everything it thought it knew. And within seconds, the ripple began. Retweets, shares, commentary. The internet had seen 1,000 hot takes that week, but this one hit different. It was subtle. It was surgical. And most of all, it was damning. While that was still being processed, something far more visceral exploded into the public square. A congressional hearing, a tense room, cameras rolling, and a voice, fierce, unapologetic, and devastatingly direct, cut through the air like a thunderclap. The Congresswoman had had enough. She didn't raise her voice to be heard over the noise. She lowered it, and the room grew still. Every word was chosen with care, delivered like a hammer wrapped in velvet. She laid out the facts like puzzle pieces, one after the other, each one connecting with the next in a way that made the picture impossible to ignore. This wasn't grandstanding. It wasn't a stunt. It was a courtroom-level dismantling of arrogance and deception, backed not by emotion but by record, by history, by documented contradiction. As she spoke, it was as though time slowed down. You could see expressions shift, eyebrows raise. Staffers glance nervously at their phones. And while her opponents may have tried to look unaffected, their silence was louder than any rebuttal they could have offered. Now imagine the impact when both moments, one digital, one live, collided. That tech world endorsement of truth, precision, and accountability amplified the congressional takedown tenfold. Millions who might have ignored a political speech tuned in. People who had never watched a hearing before suddenly found themselves glued to every word. Because when someone known for logic and disruption quietly co-signs a voice known for fearless justice, it breaks through the echo chambers like a siren. The person on the receiving end of all this? The response was immediate. Posts began flying, in all caps. Accusations, denials, blame shifting. But beneath the bluster, there was something different this time. Panic, because the usual tactics weren't working. The facts couldn't be shouted down. The digital chess master had moved a piece. The congressional firebrand had flipped the board, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like control was slipping. What made the reaction so explosive wasn't just that someone pushed back. That happens all the time. No, this was different because of who pushed back and how they did it. The contrast was staggering. On one side, thoughtful clarity and grounded logic. On the other, chaos masquerading as confidence. The comparison wasn't just unflattering, it was catastrophic. The public could see it, and they started to talk. Social media didn't just light up, it ignited. Every network, every outlet, every analyst scrambled to catch up. The fallout kept growing. Memes, clips, editorials, it all spread like wildfire. Not because it was shocking, but because it felt like justice. Like someone finally saying the quiet part out loud. Like the emperor's clothes had been yanked off in broad daylight, and no amount of shouting could cover it up. The most telling sign of all? The silence from those who would usually rush to defend. That silence spoke volumes, because deep down they knew. The facts were too sharp, the delivery too strong, the strategy too seamless. That's when it became clear. This wasn't a moment. It was a shift. A tectonic jolt that signaled the end of unchecked narratives and the beginning of a new reality. In a world where political discourse often feels like white noise, endless talking points, rehearsed jabs, and careful sidestepping, every so often someone steps into the room and speaks with such undeniable force that it stops everything. That's exactly what happened when the Congresswoman took the microphone. No theatrics, no pandering, just truth. Direct, cutting, and brilliantly delivered. She wasn't there to play it safe. From the first sentence, it was clear she had one mission: to speak facts, dismantle falsehoods, and do it all with the kind of confidence that doesn't come from a script. It comes from knowing you're right. Her tone was measured. Her words, razor sharp. She didn't shout. She didn't perform. She simply laid out the timeline, the inconsistencies, the double standards. And she did it with a calm intensity that made everyone sit a little straighter. The room, usually filled with the usual buzzing distractions, staff whispering, phones lighting up, opponents waiting for their turn to speak, fell almost completely still. You could sense it, the shift in the air, the awareness that something real was happening. She spoke not just for herself, but for every American tired of the noise, tired of the misinformation, tired of watching the powerful twist narratives to suit their own ambitions. One by one, she pulled receipts, specific dates, verifiable events, quotes pulled straight from the record. She connected the dots not with wild theories or vague insinuations, but with surgical precision. Her questions weren't rhetorical, they demanded answers. Her statements didn't provoke empty rebuttals. They left opponents staring, blinking, unsure of what to say next. And then came the moment. That mic drop sentence that sent shockwaves across the internet. A simple, scathing line that cut straight to the core of the hypocrisy she was confronting. It didn't need profanity or volume to land. It landed because it was irrefutable. It echoed, not just in that hearing room, but across timelines, screens, and conversations all over the country. People replayed it, shared it, quoted it, not because it was catchy, but because it was exactly what needed to be said. What elevated the impact even further was what happened next. A subtle nod of affirmation from one of the most unlikely places imaginable. The tech mogul, famed for his influence over digital culture and his fiercely independent streak, responded not with his usual sarcasm or riddles, but with something rare. Agreement. Just 3 simple words, but they carried weight. He didn't need to explain himself. Everyone understood what it meant. It wasn't political. It was factual. And it was powerful. That public recognition gave the Congresswoman's message a megaphone unlike any other. It leapt from the confines of the political world into the global conversation. People who don't watch hearings, who don't follow legislation, were now fully tuned in. Not because they were told to be, but because they couldn't look away. The pairing of political fearlessness and technological credibility created a storm of attention that couldn't be dismissed as partisan drama. She wasn't just speaking to colleagues in that chamber. She was speaking to the people, and the people were listening. Her words didn't need decoding. They didn't need spin. They spoke for themselves. That's what made the silence afterwards so loud. The usual defenders, the ones who leap into the fray with rehearsed outrage and red-faced rebuttals, stayed strangely quiet. Because when you're confronted with facts that can't be distorted, with logic that's airtight, the only option left is to duck and hope the moment passes. But it didn't pass. It lingered. It grew. It became a rallying cry, not for a party, but for truth, for accountability, for the kind of courage that's so often missing in public life. What she delivered in that hearing wasn't just a moment of political theater, it was a lesson. A demonstration of how the truth, when delivered boldly and without apology, can slice through even the thickest cloud of distortion. She didn't just challenge her opponent, she exposed him. And in doing so, she reminded the country that facts still matter, that courage still counts, and that sometimes the most powerful statements come not from outrage, but from calm, undeniable clarity. Something changed in that moment, something big. For years, the battle lines had been clearly drawn, red versus blue, left versus right, conservative against liberal. The script was familiar, the roles well rehearsed, but suddenly, everything got scrambled. The usual playbook was tossed aside, and a strange new alliance emerged, one that no strategist, pollster, or pundit could have predicted. A brilliant, fire-breathing congresswoman and a tech mogul with a global digital footprint found common ground, not in ideology, not in background, but in truth. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about accountability, about calling out nonsense no matter where it came from. And that shift was seismic. People weren't prepared to see two figures who should have been on opposite sides of the chessboard standing shoulder to shoulder. Maybe, not shaking hands, but nodding in silent agreement. They didn't even have to plan it. It happened naturally, organically, and because of that, it was 10 times more powerful. She brought fire. He brought precision. She spoke with the thunder of lived experience and moral urgency. He followed with cold, hard data and the kind of platform reach that makes the world stop and look. Together, without even meeting in a room, they created a force field of credibility that no spin machine could penetrate. You could almost hear the establishment's gears grinding, struggling to figure out how to label what was happening. Because how do you counter a truth that's being validated from both the streets and the boardroom? How do you discredit a voice backed by a woman who's fearless in the halls of Congress and a man who can literally shift global markets with a tweet? You can't. That's what made it so dangerous. Not just to a single person or a party, but to the whole system of control that relies on people staying in their lanes. The reactions were telling. Those who usually scoff at dissent suddenly grew quiet. Those who always found something to nitpick in every statement couldn't find a single crack in the logic. The pundits, caught off guard, tried to play catch-up, grasping at outdated labels. That no longer applied. The rules had changed. A new kind of alliance had formed. One based not on political convenience, but on shared values, honesty, logic, transparency. For many watching, it felt like the ground beneath them was shifting. Maybe, just maybe, the old guard didn't hold all the cards anymore. Maybe voices from completely different worlds could still unite around something real. And that thought alone was enough to send shivers through the traditional power structure. Because if people from such radically different spheres could agree on what was broken, what else might they agree on next? It sent a message, one that couldn't be ignored. The era of predictable narratives might be over. The age of carefully constructed echo chambers might be crumbling. Because this wasn't about party lines or tribal loyalties, this was about clarity. And when clarity shows up, it has a way of making all the noise feel very small. The country watched as this unlikely pairing flipped the script. The Congresswoman didn't flinch. She faced down decades of distortion with fire and focus. And when the tech mogul added his silent signal boost, without fanfare, without explanation, it was like a quiet thunderclap. No one could mistake the meaning. The facts were speaking, and someone with immense reach had just pointed everyone toward them. That kind of moment doesn't come often. It's rare to see truth delivered with such force from two directions, at once, especially when those directions are supposed to be opposed. But when it happens, it reminds everyone watching that labels don't always define loyalty, that real courage doesn't always come from expected places, and that the future doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the clearest one. Suddenly, the old arguments seemed tired, the usual attacks rehearsed, and in their place stood something new, unpredictable, honest, and absolutely impossible to ignore. What just unfolded wasn't merely a political dust-up or a fleeting viral moment. It was something far more profound, a reshaping of the narrative, a crack in the wall of division that's long been used to keep people distracted and divided. When individuals from radically different backgrounds with different worldviews and different platforms manage to align around one simple principle, truth, it sends shockwaves through every institution that thrives on confusion, distortion, and fear. That's why this moment matters. Not because it involved big names or sparked headlines, but because it revealed a deeper hunger in the public, an appetite for authenticity. People are tired of the endless partisan noise, tired of the manufactured outrage, tired of the same talking head saying the same things with nothing ever changing, and suddenly, here were two people refusing to play that game. They didn't ask for permission, they didn't follow the script, they just told the truth, and the world listened. The power of that kind of honesty is immeasurable. It crosses boundaries, it challenges assumptions, and it reminds people that integrity isn't owned by one side of the aisle. It's not exclusive to tech billionaires or bold lawmakers. It belongs to anyone willing to step out of the safety of silence and speak up when it counts. In this case, it just so happened that both voices, one from the floor of Congress, the other from the center of the digital universe, spoke at the same time, aimed at the same deception, and refused to back down. For many, this was the first time they saw that kind of collaboration. Not in a staged photo op, but in raw, unscripted action. It wasn't about building a coalition, it was about revealing a truth. That when the facts are clear, when the contradictions are undeniable, and when enough people stop being afraid of the fallout, real change becomes possible. Not easy, not instant, but possible. This isn't the end of a story. It's the beginning of a new one. One where unexpected allies rise above tired labels. One where influence is measured not by volume, but by substance. One where the old tricks stop working because people have finally seen through them. What happened shook the system not because it was loud, but because it was honest. And in times like these, honesty is a revolutionary act. So, as the dust settles and the noise fades, one thing remains clear. When truth finds its voice, no matter where that voice comes from, it cannot be silenced. And once people hear it, they won't forget it. Not this time.